Welcome back. This is a story about Bruce Epple. I met Bruce Epple back in 1996 when I first came to work for a law firm run by a gentleman named Dan DeCiccio. Dan DeCiccio was a very well-known attorney in Orlando. He had a small firm, about 6 attorneys. He hired me on to do workers' compensation cases. And that's when I met Bruce. Bruce was an attorney there as well. Bruce told me he was 40 years old and he was living with his parents who were from Orlando. They actually lived in Pine Hills. He was sleeping in the same bedroom that he slept in when he was a child, on the same single bed as he did when he was growing up. He told me that his wife, her name was Denise, who also worked in workers' comp, she was an insurance adjuster, had threw him out of the house because she found a stash of magazines that he had collected. These magazines were what I'll call swingers magazines. These were magazines that you could buy at that time at an adult bookstore, and it was filled with ads from people who were looking for, a hookup. Most of the ads were from either couples looking for other couples or single men looking to meet women. Very few, or prostitutes. There were prostitutes in those magazines as well. There were very few women who were actually looking for men legitimately. So he told me that he collected these magazines because to him, this was like pornography. I mean, he was enjoying, he had a sexual reaction to reading these magazines. And he told me that his father did the same thing. His father collected these swingers magazines, and that's how Bruce got into it. When Denise found these magazines, Bruce threw them all in the trash, he told me. He threw them all away, and he promised Denise that he would never do it again. Well, guess what happened? He did it again. And she found it again, she found his stash, and this time she threw him out. She told him that she'd had a dream about him going into an adult bookstore and buying these magazines. She actually dreamt it. So here was Bruce now living with his parents, and he was obsessed with Denise, his ex-wife. He told me that every night between 1 and 2 in the morning, he was going over to her house, the house where he used to live, and he would park down the block, get out of his car, walk around the back of the house, and basically hide in the bushes and watch her house at night. He was stalking her. What he was looking for was a white van. He told me that Denise had a new boyfriend who was a painter. I assume he meant a house painter. And he drove a white van. So what he was looking for was whether that white van was parked in Denise's driveway in the middle of the night. That way he could keep track of how many times this guy was over there. And he showed me a calendar. He had his computer. He had a calendar with each month on the computer. And he had an X on the days where the white van was at Denise's house. This was over a period of like 2 to 3 months. And the guy was there a lot. I mean, there were a lot of X's on there. And Bruce told me at one point he was doing this. He was out there snooping, watching, Denise's driveway. And some neighbor, came out of his house and walked up to Bruce and said, "I've just called the police, so you better get out of here." So Bruce left. And he didn't stalk her anymore, but he was still obsessed with her. He told me one day he bought a bunch of flowers. He went to her office where she worked. He tracked down her car. I mean, this guy's a lawyer. He should be worrying about practicing law, not chasing after some woman. He said he took the flowers and he laid them out across her windshield of her car. He found her car in the parking lot. And then he went and hid behind some other cars. And he waited for her to come out. And she came out. He said he watched her come out. She saw the flowers. He said she scooped up the flowers like this, smelled them, big smile. She probably thought it was from her boyfriend. And then went on her way, about her business. Eventually, Bruce got over Denise. And he then became this sexual monster, animal. He met women in Orlando. He had a woman in Clearwater, which is like 2.5 hours away. One time he told me he was involved in a threesome. He had 2 women at the same time. And what he was doing was he was going to Clearwater after work. So he would leave the office at 5 o'clock, drive 2.5 hours or whatever to Clearwater with this woman, have sex with her overnight, and then drive back immediately and come right to the office. And he would show up like at 10 or 10:30 in the morning. Well, one day I saw him come in, and it's like his tie was loose. You know, he hadn't buttoned his shirt right. I'm like, man, Bruce, you know, you gotta get your head in the game. I think you're losing it. One time, we were in an attorney's meeting with Dan DeCiccio, Bruce, and all the other attorneys. We're behind, you know, in the conference room behind closed doors, talking about cases. That's what we do in an attorney's meeting once a week. Bruce is sitting there in the meeting. In the middle of the meeting, the door opens. It's Bruce's secretary. She goes, Bruce, Judge so-and-so is on the phone right now. You got to go. Well, Bruce had a hearing. I mean, he had a hearing scheduled for that exact moment, and he didn't even realize it. Can you imagine how embarrassing that was in front of your boss? You have to jump up in the middle of the meeting and go to cover a hearing that you didn't even know about. So I knew that Bruce was in trouble. And then one day, Dan fired him. Dan fired Bruce. I don't know why. Somebody told me he was drinking. They smelled alcohol in his breath. For whatever reason, Dan fired him. So now Bruce is completely without a job, and he's living at home. And he actually got hired, even though he was fired by Dan, he got hired by another law firm. And he told me, this was at his father's funeral. I went to his house for the wake, or whatever you call it. And he said to me, I got hired from this other law firm, and they did a drug test on him, a urine test, and he tested positive for amphetamines. I'm like, amphetamines? What are you doing with amphetamines? The only thing I could think of was Bruce had a girlfriend at that time named Lois, who was a court reporter. And I'd heard that sometimes court reporters will stay up all night transcribing the dictation, whatever that they wrote down. So that was my only theory, is that it possibly could have been he got him from his girlfriend, the court reporter. He told me that he asked for them to retest it, to retest the sample. They retested the same sample, came positive again. So he didn't get the job. Fortunately, I ran into Bruce like 10 years later. 10 years later, I ran into him, and he was doing great. He was working for a firm. He was representing people. He had his life together, and everything had worked out. So I felt good about that. And that's the story of Bruce Epple. Don't forget to read my book, Broccoli Time by Dante, available now on Amazon Books.